So I haven't had a whole pile of time to think about Retrosumo since I did my last stream on Thursday. But I think it should be easy enough for us to jump back in. And there's a few things that I'm going to do. I'm not going to do anything particularly taxing today. I'm not expecting to be overly productive for whatever reason. But there's a few things that I definitely would like to add into the current state of the project in the next 60 or 70 minutes or so. The first thing that I would like to do is just 1 second. I'll make sure I'm online on all platforms. I'm online, Periscope, YouTube, and Twitch. Okay, cool. So last week I was working on Command and Enter, and I can't remember if I actually finished that off last week. So let's have a quick look. I'm just going to switch my view over, and let's see. So if we open up Chromium. Right, so let's see. So we'll go to CD Code Web Retrosumo. Now I need to get Git and GitHub configured and all of that kind of thing as well. And it's something that one or two people have asked me about is, can they see the source code for the project to date? And I haven't actually uploaded onto GitHub yet. What my plan is on that is, like, this is essentially, it's an open source project. I'm developing it in the open, so there's no sense in me not opening it up on GitHub. So I will get that done in the very near future. Probably not today, but perhaps on the next stream we could get the project up on GitHub, and then you'll be able to come in and see all of the progress to date. I kind of regret that I haven't done it that way so far, because we'd have like a commit history that you could use to jump through each stream as you go. So if anybody's coming back and they're looking at the live or the videos on YouTube after the streams have finished, they would obviously then have the benefit of being able to see what happened and when. So, but anyway, look, what we're going to do is dive in and figure out where we left off last week, because as I said, I haven't had any opportunity really to even gather my thoughts since last week. So I know the last item on the list for last week was adding the Command and Enter functionality, so that when you hit Command and Enter on your keyboard, it would actually submit the post when you were in the text area. So I'm not entirely sure we even did that last week, so just let me check. Oh yeah, we're using browser sync, so let's see if we are, no, npm watch, and that's going to open that up itself. I was hoping to spend a bit of time just prepping for this earlier on, but I'm currently back on a kind of get fit, lose weight binge at the moment. So my lunch break was basically me rushing to the gym and trying to get a gym session in before doing some work in the office, and then getting into the live stream today. Pretty busy day at the office as well, so just haven't had a chance to even think about this up until now. But anyway, let's see how things are going. So if I say hello. Okay, so that's working. Okay, what about editing? So if I say edit and I say hello again, that's working as well. Okay, so what wasn't working? There's definitely something in my mind that I had something that wasn't working here. So I think was it if you press Command Enter, it was still submitting. Okay, so not on there, which is fine. What about when you edit? So if we say, okay, so it's disabled. Oh yeah, that's. I think that's what the problem was. So it was allowing you to submit. Yeah, even if the form was actually not valid. So if it's not in a valid state, it shouldn't be submitting the form. So let's see, how are we going to resolve this? If I head into my resources, JS, where were we? We were in our post form. So if we go into edit, we can see in here that we're using the hotkey on the text input component. And right, so saying submit, update post text. and is valid. Okay. So what are we doing wrong here? The is valid is clearly there. What we could do, of course, is wrap this with an is valid as well, and just say this. So let's see if we say hello again. Okay, job done. Perfect. Okay, so that was faster than I expected. That's the first item on the list completed, so we can check that off now. So just give me 1 second, and I will do that. It's definitely a Monday. my brain is not working as well as it normally does, so you can tell it's Monday. Okay, so what have we got next on our list? Okay, so scroll to top. Okay, so this, what I want to do with this, right, is, so right now you can scroll the feed, and you know what, we might add some more dummy data in here to make the feed scroll a little bit longer. So I think we said PHP artisan, and yeah, and I think we passed for Tinker. We do. So I'm going to use the post factory to create 50 posts. And when we reload, we should now be able to scroll on for quite some time, which is cool. Okay, so hey Donica, sorry about that. Yeah, let me see if I can move my mic a little bit further away. Hopefully it won't affect the sound quality too much. I think the issue is that my microphone is actually on my desk, so I don't have like a boom arm or anything like that set up yet. That's one of those ones that, you know, I always kind of felt that should this be a successful venture into this whole live streaming thing, that I might invest into some better gear for streaming. So apologies for the keyboard noise, but it's just going to have to make do for today, and I'll see if I can come up with a better solution for the next stream. Okay, so let's see. What we're doing, we were seeding some data in here, so we can now scroll quite a bit further, which is good. So what I want to do is essentially, when you scroll down a little bit down this feed, I want a quick way of getting back to the top of the screen. So maybe on the left hand side here, we might add a little icon that will allow you to jump back up to the top of the screen, and it's as simple as that. So I have used a library to do this in the past. I think it's React Scroll. Maybe React Scroll to top. So let's try to think. Maybe scroll up button actually. Yeah, I think it might have been this one. So let me just bring this up. Let's see, scroll up button, scroll up button. No, I don't think it was that one. So let me have a quick look at another project, and I'll find out pretty quickly. So, let's see. Right. Sorry, let's scroll up. Yeah, so React Scroll Up was the one I've used before. So I'm gonna use that again. So React Scroll Up. If we have a look at this one, where is it on GitHub? Yeah, this is the one. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this, I want to put this at a pretty high level in my application. So if I bring back my source code now, let's have a look. So if I go back to my app.jsx file, I could put it in here, I guess. I think this is probably the natural home for it. So I'm going to create a new component. So let's just say scroll button. And I'll bring that in So obviously that's going to fail right now because that doesn't exist. But if I create a new file called scroll button.jsx and we will import React. And let's create a new component here and export it as default as well. So with this one, what I could do actually, now that I think about it, is I could put this into my nav.jsx file because it's kind of navigation related. So let's do that. So rather than putting it in as a separate item in there, let's do this. So then when I come back here, instead of import nav, I can just say import nav and scroll button and do that. So let's see, that means I can delete this file. Okay, and what are we doing here? Let's just say scroll button for now. Okay, what am I doing wrong? Export constant scroll button. Sorry, I'm not exporting my nav. So that should do it. Yep, okay, so now we have that. And you can see the scroll button like appears every time I scroll down the page, which is obviously not what we're looking to achieve, but we'll fix that very quickly. So the first thing I need to do here is I'm going to, sorry about that. I'm going to bring in that scroll library. So I'll need to kill this off a second and npm install save and what's it called? React scroll up. So the usage of it is really, really simple. So let's go and get that started and it's done. So we can npm run watch again. And boom. So what else are we doing? We are importing exported by the class, I think it is. So it imports scroll to top from React, but I knew I was going to have one of those days today where just things aren't working for me. My keyboard is like doing magical things. Okay, so scroll to top, and what we'll do then is we'll replace this with scroll to top. And what was the name of that prop? It was show under. So show under 160. Yeah, that might be okay. Let's see. So we don't want it to show unless they scroll down the page quite a bit. So 160 might be a bit too much, but we'll give it a go. So then if I say div scroll button, and we'll just see what happens with that. So, okay. Yeah, so that seems to be working. So if I click on it, it works. Great. Okay. So this is a couple of things that I don't like about it, the way it looks right now. I like that it fades away so if you scroll back to the top, it obviously fades out, and as you scroll down, then it comes into view, which is good. But I don't like where it is, and I obviously don't like what the button looks like. So let's fix both of those things right now. So the first thing we're going to do is fix the position. So I should be able to pass through some style properties in here. So let's try that. Yep, okay, so now it's fixed to the bottom left of the screen, which I prefer. The next thing I want to do is I want to make this look a lot nicer than it does right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's just make this a caret for now, right? So that we can kind of simulate an up arrow. We might go and get an icon library to do this instead in a moment. But let's work on bringing in some Tailwind styles to make this look like an actual button. So if we say class name, and we'll say width 12, height 12, rounded full, shadow, and BG pink 600 text weight. Let's just do that for now and see as a starting point how that looks. Okay, so that's not bad. Obviously, we're going to need to center the content. So if we say flex, item center justifies center. It's funny that browser sync connector thing is now annoying being down in that bottom left. You know what? I'm going to move it back to the right just for the sake of not having to worry about that for now. It's probably a little far in from the right for my liking, so I'm going to just push it out a little bit. Okay, and that just feels too close, so let's try 20. Yeah, okay. I'm happy enough with that in terms of position. Obviously, we'd want it to have a different state when you hover, so let's say bg pink 700 on hover. Yep, that looks good. And the icon isn't working, obviously. So to get this working, I like to use an icon library called React Feather, which is basically a React library that wraps around the Feather icon set. It's quite nice, and I think it has things like tree shaking and all that kind of stuff built in. Yeah, so it's pretty lightweight. So what we'll do is we'll pull that in. We'll kill this off. Oh, sorry. Let's install React Feather, and we'll just find what icon we're looking to use. So if we explore while we're waiting for React Feather to be added, we can do a search, and we're basically saying arrow up. Cool. So this arrow up here is the one I'm going to use for this project. We could use the chevron up as well, but I think the arrow up will work better. So let's say npm run watch again. And we'll hop back over here and let's bring in that icon. So let's say import. Oh yeah, so I think it's arrow up from React Feather. And then we can say arrow up. Now I think with the React Feather library, these are SVG icons, so they should inherit, yeah, they should inherit the style of the parent in terms of color and things like that. So because I have text white set on the parent div, you can see the icon has come through as a white icon. And I actually think, like, size-wise, that looks pretty good. I don't think I need to like change the size of the icon or anything like that. I think that works for me. So yeah, I am pleased with that. Okay, so let's scroll to top. So you can check that one off. Okay, so the next one I want to look at is just extracting some of the components that we have in play, because it's a little bit sloppy in a few places for my liking. So what will we do there? Let's see. I may not go overboard on this right now and come back to it at a later time when I have a little bit more time to extract these things out. But let's see, be anything in here that makes sense. Like obviously buttons are something that I'll definitely need to extract out at some point because we have a lot of buttons going on, and ideally we'd have a kind of a straightforward standardized button component that we could pull in and just pass it props to determine which like states it should have and so on. I actually have already pulled out the text area field, so I think that's what I was thinking I was going to pull out, was the text area field, but that's already pulled out, which is good. And I'm using that in the form field here as well. One thing I would like to do as well is the edit form and editing a post and submitting a new post. Obviously, there's quite a bit of overlap between the two of those, so it would be nice to normalize them somewhat. There's some subtle differences. So, for example, on the post, a new one, you've got a placeholder. You also only have a post button. You don't have a cancel button. Whereas when you're editing something, I'll have to post something to demonstrate. I have a cancel and save button, and obviously a little bit of different validation as well, because it's checking to see is the current state the same as what the original state was. But yeah, I'm not going to get too bogged down in that, because I think if I start refactoring now to to work on extracting buttons into components. I could probably spend the rest of the stream working on that alone. So let's just leave that for now. And what else did I want to work on today? So the next thing was submitting state. Okay, so with this, what I mean by that is it's very hard to see in the in this example, because obviously this is running locally, so it's like really, really fast. So when I type in hello world and submit, it's submitted straight away, right? It's instant. But in the reality of a web application, that's often not the case, because my browser is going to need to make a round trip to a server somewhere, and then a lot of things can get in the way in between those things happening. So in reality, you're not always going to get responses so quickly. And what that means is that you can have a situation where this form may be enabled, and it may be possible to submit this form multiple times before the submitting state has come back. So ideally what we'd like to do is actually disable this post button and submitting the form in general while the form is in a submitting state. So we'll introduce a new state, and the same with the edit button. So when this is submitting, we'll ideally show a different bit of text in here to say that it's doing something, and we'll also disable the button until it's completed the submission. So to kind of figure, or to be able to see how this will work in practice, we're going to need to simulate a bit of performance, a little bit of a performance issue, right? So let's say post or sleep one on our store method for our new post, and let's see, we might want to slow it down a little more than that. So there was a bit of a delay, but let's make it like ridiculous, right? So let's go 4 and say hello again. And you can see there's a couple of problems here. Firstly, I can submit it twice or 3 times. And if I refresh, you can see it's actually submitted it 3 times, which is definitely not what we want. But the other thing that's kind of frustrating is that when I post it, I say super duper update. There's no feedback. It doesn't feel like I've done anything. And that's because nothing's happened. And it's not until it's actually finished that I get this, oh, okay, so it's actually gone up. So we want to address that and kill both of those birds with one stone in this change that we're going to do next. So if we take a look at our main forms, so our post form, right now we have some state, and this is kind of interesting actually. We're storing this state for the post form on the parent component, but we're storing the state for the edit form on the edit form itself. I think that comes back to an earlier stream when, at one point when we were storing new posts, we wanted to be able to update the post list without having to go back to the server and make an additional API call. I think that is the reason why I ended up pulling the state up a level, but I probably didn't really need to pull the state of the store post form up this far. So we might work that backwards. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to work on the edit post form change first. So in here we have all of the state that we need for the form in the form itself. So let's kick it off in here. So the first thing I'm going to say is submitting. Now I could hook this into the is valid state, but I think it does justify having its own state. It is a separate thing after all, and plus I do want it to behave slightly differently based on whether the form is submitting or whether it's valid or invalid. So we'll create that new state, and in here we will say, okay, so if the form is valid, update the post with the text. So what we're going to say is set is submitting to true. Now this is where things could get a little bit interesting. So that function call may return before, this might return immediately, which will mean that this will just happen straight away. So this might have no impact whatsoever. So let's leave it like this for now, and we'll come back in a second and see, do we need to change this and maybe pass a callback function or something into our update post method. But for now, let's just focus on getting the UI updated. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to say, So this submit button, this save button, whether you can click that, it depends on whether right now whether the form is valid or not. But we're actually going to say, okay, it depends on like it. So this form should be disabled if the form is valid or it's currently being submitted. And the text of it should basically say depend again based on what the state is. So if it's submitting, then it should say saving. Otherwise, it should say save. So let's go with that. Let's see how we get on. So when we go to edit this post, we say 1. Okay, of course, I will need to move my sleep method onto my update to simulate that slowness. So let's say 2. Okay, so that's not working because I can still click the button, which is not what we want. So let's go back to here and let's think through what we're going to do with this. So we've got update post, which is on our original post component. And this actually accepts a callback already. That's weird. So if I look up, if I look up update post, this is weird. On update post, set is editing to false. That's the ID and the text. Okay, so it looks like we're only passing. This is the, so on update, okay, here we go. So this is what's going to actually pass through the, so this is what the edit form is actually calling, is this on update post method in the post feed item. And then that in turn calls update post on the parent, and there's a callback method on that, which in here will say set is editing to false. So what do we want to do here? Now, the easiest thing for me to do at this point would be to add the state in here. And do this. So what we would say then is set is submitting true. Now, there's one problem with that, and the problem, of course, is that if there's an error when it's updating the post, then is submitting is not going to get set back to false. So it'll get locked into this submitting state, which is obviously not what we want. So I don't think this approach is the right approach. I think we're going to need to step back and actually reevaluate how we do this particular change. Okay, so let's lose this. Now, I could do this, right? So I could say, oh, I'll call back on here as well. And then have you know, call back argument in here, and this will work. It just feels dirty. So let's go back to our edit post form. And then in here, what we're saying is that. Now we still have the same problem, right? So if I go 3, save, okay, so now it's saving. It's still enabled though. It's kind of weird. Or is it doing anything? Hang on. Let's see. So edit 5, save. Okay, so it's not actually doing anything, but that might just be my styling is not being applied. Oh yeah, okay. So is valid, then show hover pink. Okay, so we probably need to combine the state, do we? If is valid and not is submitting. So this is getting messy now as well, which is great. The joys of a increasing scope project. Okay, so we're saving. Okay, so that's working better now. That's cannot perform a React state update on an unmounted component. Okay, let me just reload and see. That could just be. Okay, so it won't let me submit again. Nope, it did. Sugar. Okay. Okay, what am I doing wrong here? What's going on there? Is that all the callbacks coming back? Yeah, okay. So you can see these are all pending. They'll take 4 seconds and then they'll come back and with that callback and close off that update. So that's not what we want. Okay, so that means in, let's see, so if is valid and not is submitting. So we come in again, still do it. Okay, that's not right. Okay, I'm surprised by that. So is submitting is false. Is valid is true. Then do this. So why is it submitting it even though? I knew today was going to be one of those days. False. That makes no sense to me. So is submitting is false. Oh, okay. And that's, another reason why this is just not, this is getting messier and messier, right? So I might need to say, like, use callback here. Okay. This is one of those times now when I wish I actually had an audience watching of people who'd come in and say, oh, no, you should do it this way. But my brain is just not working today. So let's see. So what do we want to do? Something like this. No, this doesn't feel right either. Okay. Identifier expected. Let's see. What do you mean identifier expected? What's the problem? React use callback. What time have we? Oh man, this is ridiculous. Okay. Use callback. Oh yeah, of course. So do that, and I still don't think this is going to work. But no, okay. Okay, I think what I'm just going to do, because I'm going to run out of time really quickly if I get lost in this one right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some time to think about the best way to have this whole submitting state handled in this app, and come back and actually tackle that in a future stream. Because right now I feel like I'm just making things very messy. So I'm going to revert back to where we were and move on to something else. So let's see. So let's go back to here, and then hey CEO of Valve, great username. What languages am I interested in? So I'm interested in tons of languages. What I work with primarily are JavaScript, and more specifically the React library, and React Native as well for mobile apps. So I've been working with React and React Native for about 2.5 years. I've been working with JavaScript since the late 90s. But I suppose I've been kind of dipping in and out over the years. I would have done a lot of stuff with Sencha and XJS frameworks back in kind of late 2005 or 2007 to 2012 kind of era. Then I kind of stepped away from a lot of JavaScript and didn't do much with it at all for a number of years until picking it back up more recently for React. On the back end, I've kind of used a plethora of different languages over the course of my career, but most recently I've gone back to the world of PHP, primarily because of Laravel, the web framework Laravel, which... So I've been involved in startups for the last number of years, and one of the things that I just absolutely love and adore about Laravel is how quickly you can build pretty substantial applications that do a lot of complicated things with something like Laravel. It's very much a batteries included framework, gives you pretty much all the components that you're going to need to build a pretty scalable web application. So I've been using that quite a bit. So yeah, back to the world of PHP. Other things I've used, I've said this on previous streams, but like other languages I've used over the years, I was the CTO of a C# and .NET shop for a while. And I spent a lot of my career actually working with PL SQL, believe it or not, which is a stored procedure language for creating code within an Oracle database. And at one point in my career, I actually wrote an entire web framework for PL SQL so that you could execute PL SQL stored procedures and have them respond to HTTP requests and bring you back data from an Oracle database. Absolute madness, but that was my life for quite some time, actually. Did I ever use a language called Racket? I didn't, actually, no. And it's funny because I'm at the stage of my career and I suppose life in general where back when I was in my 20s, I would have basically been sampling and trying pretty much any language you could possibly throw at me because I had the time to do so. But, fast forward to today, I'm in my mid-30s, I'm married, I have a mortgage, I've got 3 kids, and my time is definitely at a premium these days. So I don't have as much time to spend on basically messing around with new technologies or languages as I used to. So yeah, no, I haven't actually worked with Racket, but I'll have to, let's see. I've heard of it. I haven't actually, beyond actually hearing of it, I haven't done much. So batteries included, that sounds good. So an extensive standard library, cross-platform, powerful macros and languages. Okay, so it started off as a scheme implementation. Interesting. Just looking at the syntax there. Okay, so yeah, that kind of reminds me of my days working with Node.js and the Jade language for serving up templates. I don't know why, but yeah, the syntax here, if I'm being honest, this is I would probably struggle with it with Racket. I'd probably need to actually spend some time and dive into it for this to even make any sense to me. I'm trying to even figure out what I'm looking at here. Scheme and Lisp based languages are something I haven't really spent a whole lot of time with. But I can see even just from the variety of different examples here the benefits of that type of approach. But it's not something I've actually spent too much time on. Just wanted to ask, because you're learning Racket in university and you don't know if it'll help me in my career or not since you're in the sector. Good question. I think, for me, when it comes to languages, I think having a wide enough array of languages in your arsenal is never going to be a bad thing. I think with this, with Racket, perhaps it's probably not something that I would choose to use to build a web application in. But if I was using it for, building different types of applications, it might make a lot more sense. Whether it's worth, whether it's going to help you in your career or not, I don't think I can really answer that, because you could have asked the same question a number of years ago about languages like Go, which I think would probably help you in your career if you were looking for a career in Go. What I would say though about some, like even with some obscure programming languages, like there's always opportunities out there, and sometimes the more obscure the language, the better, in terms of there's not a very wide talent pool there for things like that. So oftentimes you can be a lot more valuable to an organization if you have familiarity with an unusual programming language. And I definitely have experience of that from my days of trying to build web applications using Oracle PL SQL. If you look at it, then there's other languages that have come and go, very quickly. So that's probably the biggest thing with Racket. Obviously, being in its infancy right now, is it might be irrelevant in a few years, but at this point, you just don't really know. I think the key thing I would say though is that you're learning something in university. Like Racket is it's a scheme or list based programming language. So what you're going to learn by learning Racket is you're going to learn the benefits and the pros and cons and all of that of working with a scheme style language. So I definitely wouldn't see it as being a bad thing. But I certainly would recommend, widening your horizons from don't just learn Racket. You probably want to learn a kind of a more traditional language as well. If even just to know what you prefer and what the benefits are of each. So I'm probably not the best person to ask on whether Racket is actually specifically, something you should learn. But as I say, I've only heard of it. But good luck with it. It looks quite tricky. The syntax definitely looks unusual. But as I say, scheme and list based languages are not something that I have in my own arsenal. But maybe someday. Okay, so I'm going to jump back and let me see. I had just removed some of the messing that I had started on there. Let me have a look at what else I was planning on doing today. So we had submitting state, toasts. Okay, so toasts. This should be a pretty easy thing to do, right? So this kind of comes back to the second problem that I mentioned when I was talking about introducing a submitting state into the project. And that is that when I say, okay, I'm going to go edit something. When I click that save button, nothing happens. It's not clear that anything is happening, right? Now, obviously, the submitting state is going to take care of the fact that, letting me know that something is actually happening after I've clicked the button, even if there's a delay before the response comes back. But the other side of it is that once the update is completed, ideally, I'd have some kind of feedback telling me that, that action, actually completed successfully. Whereas right now, all that happens is it says, okay, so I press save, and then it just returns back basically to the original state. I'm actually just going to take out that sleep as well, because that's going to drive me crazy. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in a toast component. Thank you for your pins. Good luck with your application. No problem. And yeah, best of luck in university and with Racket. So with Toast, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a Toast component to basically pop up a little message, either at the top of the screen here or at the bottom of the screen saying, posted successfully, or post updated successfully, or indeed post deleted successfully. So I'm just going to do a quick look at what the landscape. I've used React Toastify before, but I'm not a massive fan of the look of it. So I might just try something else if we can find something. I've heard of this one actually, this React Toast notifications. So let's have a look at what it looks like. Okay. So that looks better than the React Toastify component that I've used in the past, but it's still not brilliant, to be honest. It's a bit too styled for my liking. I love when the Toast component is just like really minimal and bare. Okay, so it looks like we can style it. Oh yeah, no, that's much more like it. Okay, so that's the kind of Toast that I would like to see. Is this kind of like dark gray or black even component. And yeah, that's nice. I really like that. So let's check this one out. Let's see, can we use it? Actually, the one other thing that we're going to need to figure out is, can we use this with hooks? Let's go to the GitHub project and have a look. Use toast. Boom. Okay, decision made. So it looks like we can. So npm install react toast notifications. Save. Okay, so what are we doing? We're saying toast provider, use toast. Okay, so we're going to need to wrap probably our app component in here with a toast provider. And we will import toast provider from React toast notifications. Okay. And then what we need to do is in here, say add toast from, sorry, not add toast, use toasts from React toast notifications. Okay, and then what we can do is say const add toast is equal to use toast. Looks straightforward to me. When do we want to post? We want to do these when there's a successful post. So let's add them in here. So we'll say const add toast is equal to use toasts. And we should be able to say after this, say add toast and posted successfully, and then appearance error. Okay. I'd probably create a standard method to do that in a moment, but let's start off with this. So if we save that and reload, and this is on when you create a new post. Oh, forgot to run watch. So I'm just going to close up. Yeah, it's not running yet. Okay, so right, what time have we come up to? 5 o'clock. That's fine. We'll definitely get toast done anyway. We might go back to the submitting thing then and after that. So what we're doing is we're saying hello. Okay, so posted successfully. Obviously, I've got the state wrong. I've said appearance error, whereas it should be appearance success. So let's try that again. Another go. Okay, so that works, and we get this little post message. But I just don't like the appearance of it. To me, it's just, it actually doesn't seem to be dismissing either for some reason. So we're going to need to sort that out. But yeah, I prefer if it was just a bit plainer. So let's see if we can figure out how to do that here. So this is Toast Manager, but we're not using Toast Manager. Okay, so if we go down here, we'll say, okay, so Toast Provider has some props, so that's what we have up here. So in this, we can say auto dismiss timeout. Is, let's say, 2000 milliseconds. Children, components. Okay, so we can replace the components, which I suspect is what we're going to have to do to actually get the toast to appear the way we want it. Placement, oh cool. So we can do that at the top level, which I like a lot. So we'll say top right. So what have we got? Top right, top center, top. Okay, so top center, let's try that. And transition duration, all 220, the duration of the CS. Okay, we'll leave that alone for a second. So let's see what happens when we do that. Okay, so that's better. And dismiss works, but it's still not auto dismissing, is it? Okay, so how do we get to auto dismiss? Toast props appearance. So appearance is required, which is kind of gnarly. I wish it wasn't. Children is required, which is the content of the toast, which is fine. Auto dismissed boolean default. Okay, so that's why it's not dismissing. Okay, so this is going to get nasty pretty quickly. So we're going to have to say auto dismiss true every time we use add toast. Don't really like that. Okay, so it should dismiss. Yeah, okay. So that's I like it when it's short and snappy as well. Oh, this looks cool. Yeah. So the React toasts, I actually like the library. It's like really easy to use, which is good. It gives us some nice functionality. What I'd like to do though is I'd like to make it look a little bit closer to this. I just prefer a clean look for notifications. So this notification down at the bottom, for me, just looks a little bit simpler and nicer than this, like kind of very stylized with the fading nav or the fading progress bar on the left and stuff like that. So I would like to make it just a little bit simpler. So I think if it's all, we can overwrite the component. So let's see, replaceable components. So my custom toast provider, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so if we go back up here, we should be able to say, we should be able to pass a component onto this toast provider and it will use that instead. So let's see, if we created a toast.jsx component and import React from React, export const toast is equal to, and let's say BG gray 700 text white. We'll need to do some more styling on this in a moment. I know that for sure. And this should get the children props, I guess. Yeah, okay. So let's do that. And then what are we doing? We're saying in here, we want to import from toast. And we will say, let's make some more space. And components is toast. We don't really need anything, just that. Okay, so what happens when we do that? Okay, it's not working. So we need to export default toast as well. If you want to import it that way, that works. And then hello. Okay, so we should be able to now style that a little bit better. So let's go a bit darker and let's add some padding. So we'll say P4. Oops. We'll say rounded, and we'll say shadow. Okay. Probably put a little bit extra padding on the widths. Yeah, that looks okay. Probably isn't perfect, but to be honest, it's a starting point, and I prefer this look to what we had before. So not far off. Just leaving it at that for now. Now I know there's one thing that I'm not doing here, which I probably should do, is I'm not like differentiating based on the type of message. So like I should probably think about having like different styling based on whether it's an error message, a success message, and so on. But I actually prefer to use toasts like this, just as a kind of a flash of information to say, yeah, this happened, this happened, this happened. So I'm pretty happy with that, to be honest. For now, anyway, we might come back later and actually add some more styling to it. What I like about it as well is that it's wrapping around child components, so I could easily add more into it if I wanted to. What I don't like about the library right now is this. So I can just see now I'm going to have to say add toast with this, like pretty, like I'm always going to want it to auto dismiss, and I'm probably always going to, or I'm going to want it to default to something anyway from an appearance perspective. So I don't like that I have to like pass these in every single time. So let's go and create a, we'll abstract it into a function here for now. So we'll say show toast is equal to something, and we'll say add toast message, and we'll say options, and let's go and create options is appearance success and auto then actually is we could say options is blah, and then we could say these are default options, and then we could say custom options, and then we could say const options is equal to default options custom options, right? So if we do that, then what we can do is instead of saying this, we could say show toast and post it successfully. Ah, come on. Hey, hello. Boom. Okay, so that's still working. But what I like about this then is I can just say, okay, once this is done, say post updated successfully. I don't have to pass that object in every time that I want to call this. So in here, we can say post deleted successfully. So if I delete, okay, delete it successfully, say this is an update, enter, post updated successfully, perfectly, or perfect. So the only other thing I want to test is that my custom options is working. So let's pass in auto dismiss false into, let's say, store post for now, and just see, does that actually override? So let's reload. Hello. Ah, didn't work. Okay. Do I have these in the wrong order? Oh, I'm sorry. I should have had these. Use the spread operator. So I may have them in the wrong order anyway, though. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, cool. So that's working. So I'm going to remove this again and just make sure this still works. Ooh, okay, perfect. So that's my toast. And as I said, at a later date, we'll come back and maybe add a little bit more styling to that. But for now, I like the simplicity of what we have. So that's the toast. Okay. So what else do we have on the list? So we had obviously the submitting state item that we skipped over a while back. API resources is another thing I could look at. But I don't know where we're going to get a huge amount of value out of API resources at this point. I'm not even sure why I put them onto the list. Let's see. So if I look up Laravel API resources, we'll see what we've got going on here. So when building an API, you might need a transformation there. We probably don't really right now, but future-proofing, it might make sense to have a transformation layer in place so that you're not trying to add it later on. So if we're making a resource on the post class, we could do that. And then you can have a resource for collections as well. So it kind of feels like this might be overkill. Yeah, I think this is probably overkill for what we need to do in this project right now. So I think I might just give resources a skip. Resource collections, you pass back the data and so on. Data wrapping, again, yeah, we just don't need any of this. So I think I'm just going to leave it as is for now. And we'll come back to this when it is actually an issue that is something that we want to resolve. I'm just going to have a quick look at some of my notes and see, is there anything like nice and quick that we could have a look at that we can finish off on today that we haven't done. So let me see. We could do what? Okay, yeah, that's actually one thing that I would like to do at this point, right? So you might remember, no, actually. So what I was going to do is I was going to move this state down to the form so that we didn't have to pass it back up here like we do right now. But the problem with doing that is I may end up moving it back out again once I've decided what I'm going to do about that is submitting state and where I'm going to store that. So I'm going to hold off on doing that one as well until I've had a chance to have a proper think about what the best approach is for that. Let's see, what other things can we do that would be pretty quick? So there was one thing actually that was bugging me, and it was to do with my buttons here. Okay, so on the submit button on the two form components, we have this class name equals, and it's an absolute mess, right? So I would like to tidy this up considerably. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up, I think there's a library called class names, which will hopefully make it easier for to do this kind of stuff, right? So let me see. So what have we got? The project philosophy, blah, 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 blah. Class names, usage with React. It's official replacement for class set, which was originally added, blah, blah, blah. One of its primary use cases is to make dynamic and conditional class name properties to work with. So where you may have the following code to generate a class name prop for a button in React, you can express the conditional classes more simply as an object. Yes, this is exactly what I wanted. Yeah, okay. So what we'll do is we'll come out here. So we're going to bring in the class names library for starters. So let's npm install class names. And we're going to say the submit button class is equal to what? Class names, and we'll put in some arbitrary stuff in there. So we will npm run watch again, and we'll need to import class names as well here. So import class names from class names. Okay. So let's see. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all of these out, and we're going to put them in. Let's see, button true, false, etc., etc., etc. Oh yeah, okay. So I think we can actually do this, which is quite nice. So we can just wrap all these, because we know we're going to want all of those. And then we can comma separate that, and then we can put in any conditional ones into this object in here. So what we're going to say is, okay, so we will want this is valid. And we will say this not is valid. Let's just do that for now. See what that looks like. So then what we'd have in here is we'd have submit button class instead. And at least it's just it's brought up here where it makes more sense to have some logic, right? So if we look at that, that looks good, and we say test, and it's enabled. Posted successfully. Okay, so that looks better. Definitely, it's just more readable. A quick look. The only thing I'm not massively keen on is that we have like the class names out like this for the states. Let's see, is there a better way of doing that? Name. Yeah, not seeing anything, to be honest. So look, it's definitely an improvement over what we had. We'll probably want to do the same thing in the edit button until we extract out the buttons in here. We want to do the same thing with that. In fact, this one has an MX2 class on it as well, so I'm going to put that in separately just because it's not part of the standard button. This is purely because it's in the edit form. So let's do that. And then we can get rid of all of this rubbish and say submit button class as well. And that should still work. So we go edit, and there you go. Okay, so it's working. Okay, so that's class names brought in. What did I just change? Nothing. Okay. Right. What else? Okay, so that's class names. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, so I suppose it might just be a good point to, or a good time to maybe step back and actually talk about what I'm looking at doing next. So where the kind of big features that I'm going to be moving on to from here, right? So obviously, like, things are still pretty simple, but one of the things you may have noticed if you've been following along these videos is that I'm trying to make sure that I like pay attention to some of the smaller details that often get overlooked when people are working on projects like this in the open. So in the interest of like showing how to do everything, people often skip over small little details. So things like, you know, typing into the text box and pressing Command and Enter to submit the form. You know, when you have a text area, like little details like that, or even little details like when you click on an edit button that it selects the text and focuses it on the text input. Small little details like that, or that the state of the form makes sure that you can't actually submit it when it's in an invalid state, or if you haven't made any changes that you can't submit the form, because what's the point in submitting it if there's no changes, and that kind of thing, right? So those smaller little details, I'm just trying to get those right. So that's why I'm, you know, even the things like having the submitting state that I do want to come back and actually get done before we move on. That stuff is I just feel is really important. But past that, what are the things that we're going to be moving on to? So there's a few things, right? So I think we're almost done with the plumbing for this main feed that we have with this project. So there's one other area of plumbing that I want to put in place before I start moving into kind of more interesting things like user avatars and having reactions and having comments and threaded comments, and also things like uploading, you know, images and videos and attachments and other kind of non-text data up to your posts. Before I get to those, there's one other area that I'd like to do some work on, and that is like right now we're looking at a full list of a full feed or a list of updates or posts. But when we get into adding a lot of functionality into the project, we're also going to want to look at individual posts, you know, on their own, right? So look at them in isolation to other posts within the feed. And also then we want things like the ability to like have a URL that will link directly to a specific post. And ideally when you click, you know, something like when you click on the timestamp, that it will, you know, give you basically that permalink for that particular post. And then when you view a post, you know, it should show you the full post, but it should also show you some more information. So if there's comments on the post, you'll see the threaded comments showing it underneath it, and that kind of thing. So to do this, one of the things that we're going to have to introduce is some way of actually having different views within our application. So like right now, we've just got like this single view in our application, which is our post feed. So we're going to be introducing a new view, which is essentially going to allow you to view an individual post. So to do that, from experience, the best way to do this is to bring in a library for routing, as we'd say in Ireland, or routing, as you say in the US. So essentially, what you could have is that you can navigate from one view to another using this library. Now we're going to be using this for all sorts of things as we flesh out the project. So when you have an edit profile screen, for example, that will take you away from, you know, this list of activity entirely to a place where you can manage your profile. So it'll be a completely separate screen. Things like being able to view an individual post is going to open a modal view with just that post over the current view that's going to stay in position behind it. But even in spite of it being in a modal, it's going to have its own dedicated URL. So if you share that link with somebody, then they'll get brought straight to that post. And that's something I would like to put in place before I go too much further, because that's the kind of thing that becomes a little bit more challenging to add the kind of more complicated your project gets. Plus, we're going to need React routing for so many other aspects of this project, for navigation, for adding new features, for things like when we bring in the game aspects of all of this. All of that is going to need to have a decent routing system in place for it to work. So we're gonna look at doing that. The other thing I'd like to do then is look at the, sorry, just 1 second, somebody's arriving here. Oh, it's just the postman. So the other thing that I'd like to bring in is around user avatars. So right now, like, it's a bit like all of these posts are really boring because it's just like literally somebody's name, posted an update, a timestamp, and some text, and there's nothing else to them. So even something as small as each user having an avatar will be good. And one of the things that I'd like to do right from the get-go with that is have a good strategy around fallback avatars. So what we'll do is we'll have essentially the base like avatar, which will be like some kind of a user icon, right? Which will be the fallback of fallback. So if we can't display anything else, we will display that. But we will then have another layer of fallback avatar, which is basically going to be a generated. You've seen them in every platform under the sun, right? It's a generated avatar with the initials of the user's name displayed in big text on a randomized color. So we'll implement that as well, and that will probably be what's going to be served up for the vast majority of our users here. We'll also talk through then how to generate those. We'll probably look at making sure that they run on a job so that they're queued and things like that, rather than having them run synchronously in the application. We'll then need a screen where people can upload their own custom avatar. So rather than using that fallback generated initials based avatar, you'll be able to upload your own. So we'll need to implement that as well. That'll kind of introduce the concept of, okay, well, where are we going to store user-generated content on the server? And I'm, again, from my experience, it makes sense to never rely on your servers for state whatsoever. So like my golden rule of thumb whenever I'm deploying any project into production is to never rely on the state persisting on the server, because in an ideal world you want to run in a load balanced environment where servers are just commodities, and if you want more you just add more, and if you want to spin things down you just kill them off, and that's it. And if you have state on your servers, that becomes a much bigger challenge. So files are pretty easy because generally speaking people will store them in object-based storage like Amazon S3 or DigitalOcean Spaces or Google Cloud Files or whatever the equivalent is on Microsoft Azure. So we have plenty of options in terms of cloud storage to be able to do that. But one thing that I would like to do is to build it in such a way that it's kind of agnostic, so it doesn't really matter. So to do that, we're just going to need to make sure that we kind of leverage Laravel, which actually does abstract a lot of this stuff away for us anyway. But use it effectively so that we're using like the fly system disks that you get in Laravel correctly and efficiently. One thing that can be challenging when you're dealing with is when you're trying to do things like processing images. So when we jump into it, I may end up taking a completely different approach whereby we may end up using a third-party service to do that. So there's one thing that comes to mind straight away, which is I've heard this advertised on various podcasts recently, which just goes to show that podcast advertising is actually a pretty good way to advertise to developers. But there's this service called Cloudinary, which I believe you can basically just dump your images, onto Cloudinary, and then it'll give you this like really, really nice way of actually plucking off different versions of that image. So if you want a thumbnail, or you want it cropped to a square and you want the faces to be kept in the center, or if you want it to be black and white, or you want it to be a different dimension, all of these things are all provided to you through Cloudinary. So I might end up using this, but again, there's a cost associated with this as well. I'm not sure what that cost is, so let's have a look. So it's $0 for 25 monthly credits, which is 1,000 transformations, or 1 gigabyte of managed storage, or 1 gigabyte of net viewing bandwidth, or 500 video presets. That's not a lot, actually. So that's that's quite a limited free tier, which is fine, and you know they should limit their free tier so that they can actually make money out of this thing. But I'm immediately a little worried about the viability of Cloudinary for this particular project by the first price that we have that isn't free, and that is $89 a month, which, you know, for a big business, you know, that's fine, that makes sense. But when you're talking about a small kind of side project like this, $89 a month just for your like image processing is probably a little overkill. So I probably won't end up using Cloudinary for this particular project on the basis of that, given that the free tier is still quite limited in terms of what you can do with it. So anyway, gone off on a complete tangent there, but that's kind of where things are going next, is bringing in React routing, and then starting to look at some of the more complicated pieces of functionality around these posts and actually enhancing them. So I'm going to leave it there for today. Between now and the next stream, which is on Thursday, I am going to go and have a good think about what the best thing to do is with regards to this submitting state and where to put it, so that we don't like basically create callback hell, which I'm kind of starting to do when you look at like how all of this, where's that example? No, not new, in here, callback. So yeah, so in this update example, like we callback functions kicking in, and you know I want to avoid having callbacks within callbacks and things like that. So I'm going to spend a bit of time figuring that out and coming up with a good strategy there. And once I have that done, then on Thursday I'll get that element of the process finished off. There's one other thing actually just before I finish off for today that I will hopefully bring into play at some point in the not too distant future, and that is around real time. So one of the things that I really like to kind of crack with this project is that rather than having to do any kind of element of long polling to try and determine whether there's updates available on the server and all of that kind of thing, I would really like to take a different approach with this project and actually like build it to embrace WebSockets or a third-party service like Pusher or something like that right from the very start. So something that comes to mind straight away is that as I'm scrolling down through this activity feed or this feed of posts, it would be nice if I could be alerted when there are new posts available for me to see. And traditionally, I would have done this by using Ajax long polling and checking for updates on the server and passing in maybe the last ID of an update and then looking for anything past that. But something I'd much prefer to do in this particular project is to have that driven by WebSockets, so that when somebody posts something, then it's instantly going to send a message out to all connected clients saying, hey, there's a new post. And then the clients can figure out, do they have that post already or do they not? And if they don't, then it can render a message saying, well, okay, I've got all of these new posts waiting. What I really like about that as well is that we can actually push the posts to the client, which means that if they decide to load the new posts, we don't actually need to do an API call. We can just actually show and render the new posts in the feed, which I think would be really, really sweet. So this will kind of, this is not something that's overly straightforward to do. I do want to do real time. I want to embrace real time for a lot of other things as well. So once we get into things like reactions and comments and things like that, the counts around those especially ideally will be updated in real time as things happen in the background. So to do that, I'm going to be using the one thing I do know about what I'm going to do with this is what I'm going to be using to achieve it, and that is Laravel's broadcasting functionality. So if we have a look at the API docs for this, just for a very quick second, you'll see we've got all of this stuff around what broadcasting is. So essentially in Laravel, you have the ability to broadcast events within the platform. But one thing that it does that's really nice is it gives you like channels that you can broadcast these on using things like Pusher or WebSockets to actually push these events to the client. Right, so if there's clients that are connected to a WebSocket or to Pusher, your Laravel application can actually send updates to them in real time, which is really, really nice. So the idea being that essentially, if we were to, let's say our post controller here, right? So post controller, whoops. in our post controller, when a new update is created using this store method, what I end up doing is saying event new post created or something like that, right? I'm passing the post. And when I do that, then what that's going to do is basically dispatch an event, and then within that event I can actually do some interesting stuff, right? So I'm not going to do it right now, but essentially you have like the ability to define a channel that event would be broadcast on, and then you can define some authorization rules about who should be able to listen to what channel. You can have private channels, presence channels, public channels, all sorts of things, which are really cool. And then on the client side of things, you can connect to them using a first-party Laravel product called Laravel Echo, which is essentially a wrapper around socket.io or around Pusher's JavaScript SDK, which allows you to essentially connect up to the Laravel backend using these public, private, or presence channels, and then listen for events on those, and those events will basically map over to these events that you create in Laravel. So if I have a new post created event, once that's fired, I can listen for that event on my front end, and then I can do something in the UI once that update comes through. So you can imagine when you have like things like like counts on updates and all of that kind of stuff, if somebody likes something, that's going to have an impact on the likes count for that item. So I could basically broadcast a message to all connected clients saying that, hey, this item has been updated, this is the new likes count. And then I can actually check, okay, on the client, do I have this particular item loaded? If I do, then update the likes count with this new likes count, and then React's rendering process will kick in, and I'll see the new count on all of the connected clients, which is actually really, really nice. So that's something that I'd really like to do as part of this project as well. So that's something that we're going to be looking at in the not too distant future with this with this Retrosumo project, is actually bringing Laravel Echo real-time broadcasting events into the equation. There's one thing I know, I've worked with Echo before, and there's one thing I've always struggled with when not working with like a default scaffolded Laravel application, and that's this one here. So where I can broadcast an event, but I only want to broadcast it to users other than the user who instigated the event. So an example of that would be here, where if I'm the person who created this post, then ideally I don't broadcast this message to that user. I only broadcast it to everybody else. So I've had like a lot of trouble getting that to work, and it's all down to how this is configured. And you can see here, it's like passes like an XSocket ID header in. I just don't seem to be able to get that to work for some reason. So I will come back and actually have a good look at this properly someday. But it's definitely something that I think would be really nice to add into this project, and it's a learning that I want to bring back to my main work environment as well, because adding that real-time functionality is something I'm really keen to do in the near future there. So that's again kind of looking ahead to the future, but something that I'm very keen to bring into play with Retrosumo. So didn't really do a whole pile today. Didn't make as much progress as I was hoping to, but I was kind of expecting that just based on my own mood today. So gonna leave it at that for now. We'll come back, we'll look at the submitting state stuff the next time. We'll look at some other more fun elements as well. And so for anybody who's watching, you want to catch the next one, it'll be on this coming Thursday, 4 p.m. GMT, which is Irish time, or 11 a.m. Eastern time, or 8 a.m. Pacific. So definitely check that out. If you want to check out some of my previous videos, check out my YouTube channel, and would love to see you again. So be sure to subscribe and get some notifications whenever I'm streaming. And that's it for today. Thanks a lot.